A city, a proud people, and many families divided in the pre-dawn hours. A scar on a nation had its beginnings on this day. More on that in a moment. We begin in 1521. After an extended siege, forces led by Spanish conquistador Hernan Cortez capture Teotihuacán and conquer the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan. The conquest of Mexico was a critical stage in the Spanish colonization of the Americas. Ultimately, Spain conquering Mexico and thereby gaining substantial access to the Pacific Ocean meant the Spanish Empire could finally achieve its goals of reaching the Asian markets. 1792, King Louis XVI of France formally arrested by the National Tribunal and declared an enemy of the people. He and his wife, Marie Antoinette, were guillotined in the following year. Two of their children would also die of tuberculosis by age 10. Their daughter, Maria Theresa, spent most of her life in exile, though she would eventually become Queen of France for about 20 minutes, just long enough for her and her husband to abdicate in 1830. 1898, the Spanish-American War. Spanish and American forces engage in a mock battle for Manila, after which the Spanish commander surrendered in order to keep the city out of Filipino rebel hands. I say mock battle because the two commanders had already decided on how it would end, rather than so that the city would become American and not fall into rebel hands. As the sides engaged intentionally in accurate gunfire, some of the native allies of the Americans thought the battle was for real. About 40 men died before the commanders could get their forces back under control. And finally, in 1961, under cover of darkness, this happened.
For freedom. East German troops swooped down on the border between Red Berlin and the Free City in the pre-dawn hours to close the 66 points where movement between the sectors has been relatively free. East Berliners who held coveted jobs in the West were told to stay home, and the elevated trains were halted. Mayor Willy Brandt, commenting on this latest Russian move in the War of Nerves, cautioned East Berliners against revolt, exhorting them to do nothing rash.
That, of course, the beginning of the Berlin Wall. East German troops erecting a series of fortifications and barbed wire over a 66-mile perimeter surrounding the American section. 2 days after the wire went up, work on the stone wall began. About 1,500 people had been fleeing the Soviet bloc each day through Berlin. That would, of course, drop precipitously. The wall eventually stood 12 feet high with rings of machine gun nests. About 200 people shot and killed trying to defect before the wall finally came down in 1989. That was a celebration worldwide. That's your look back in history, and I'm Donald Ing.